guest. It's such a great topic. And it's something I feel very selfish about that I need so badly right now. We are going to talk to Mike Torpey. He is the senior designer for the Kia Design Center America, Kia Motors, the cars. And we're going to talk about how to be creative right now when we do not really feel that inspired. I mean, I don't know about you, but I am in a house with 4 children and 2 dogs who are constantly touching me. And it's so much, and my brain is zapped. And you, I'm sure, Mike, have completely different struggles and pulls, and you have this very prestigious job, and you've been thrust into this like crazy new working situation. So we're going to dig into all of that. We're going to really pick your brain and tap into your creative genius and inspiration. But first, I want to give you a minute to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started with cars.
Awesome. Hey, Jill, nice to meet you, and glad to be doing this with you all today. I'll keep it fairly brief, but I'll just sum it up. I'm the adult version of that kid that grew up not paying attention in class and sketching little doodles of cars when he should have been doing his math homework. And somehow it worked out for me, which is awesome. So it can happen.
I gotta say, as a parent, that is like so relieving to hear. You always hear these stories of kids that like grow up being like troublesome in some weird, quirky way, and then it's like totally makes sense. They're super successful for some reason. So I was saying before we started this, I was like, this just gives me hope that my kid will become a professional Fortnite player. Like, who knows, right?
It happens.
It can happen. So, I think all of us right now, our kids may be leaning into some weird little creative quirk or something that they're trying to get their creative energy out. And so,
Right.
like, that gives me hope that we should fill those creative needs with our kids. Did your parents feed into that in any way? Did they buy you a ton of cars or sketchbooks?
Sketchbooks galore. My mom was a school teacher. My dad was an engineer, so it was a pretty good reinforcement from both sides. We always had a craft drawer in the house, this big old chest of drawers that had construction paper and markers and pen and scissors and glue and all that stuff. And from an early age, my mom was pushing it with us. She could see that my brother and I responded pretty strongly to art. And my dad's engineering background, he was always working on cars out in the garage. He was pretty passionate. He still is about many different aspects of engineering and design. So I think my mom was a lot stronger on the idea that I'd pursue something that was more artistic than my dad. He was a bit more practical minded, like, how do you make money doodling cars, But they were super positive. If a kid shows enthusiasm for something and an aptitude and just won't quit, then I think parents have to, either they fight and they lose, but if a kid's passionate about something, they're going to pursue it. And my dad came around, and just to briefly mention, I went to one of the 2 at the time really strong design schools in the country. After trying to be an engineer initially, which I thought was how you designed cars, I thought guys with slide rules and pocket calculators did all the beautiful aesthetics of cars. But no, it's guys with markers and pen and clay. And I found a school in Detroit, Michigan, the College for Creative Studies, that visiting this school, it was like having your finger plugged into an electric socket. It was just, I can't believe here's all these weirdos like myself that are so into doing this. And it's in Motor City. It's the home of the car and the American car. So there was no stopping at that point. So
that's so great. So even from an early age, you were looking for that inspiration. And so what sparked inspiration for you as a kid, and what sparks inspiration for you now? Is there a similarity there? Has there been an arc? Like, kind of tell us about like your journey through being inspired.
Wow. Well, I still buy Hot Wheels cars. Like, I'm every trip to the grocery store, if I pass an end cap that has Hot Wheels cars, I have to go through every single Hot Wheels car to make sure there's not one in there that I haven't seen before, because these are still inspiring. The guys that design these, I know these guys as well. These are designers. They're designing even more fantastic visions of what the car might be. And that's, I think, what inspired me as a kid. There were certainly plenty of like little toy cars and Legos in the house as a kid. And you start out learning to try and draw the cars that you're drawn to most. And I think this is the way a lot of artists start out, is they're inspired by something that they just find beautiful or compelling in the world. And they want to try and know it more by sketching it, by really seeing it. And once they've learned how to do that, it's just like, wow, that's great. But now how can I start to do something even more beautiful, or more like my twist on this, or like I'd like to see this car but with that fender, and like, oh man, like why does nobody do something that's shaped like this? And before you know it, everything spirals. It's what you find beautiful things in the world that might not even be directly related to your discipline, but they bring something. If it's exciting, you're gonna drink it in, and it'll just stir within you. And I mean, most people know how inspiration and creativity works. It's not a linear process.
Yeah. So beyond cars, what else, is your home really slick and immaculate? Do you love to decorate? Do you find that trickles out into other areas of your life in creative ways?
You know, I always thought that, this is funny. My girlfriend has a little bit different taste, take on decorating than I do, but I always thought that the perfect house would have a workbench in a living room, so that your home is, every square inch of it is a place to create.
Functional. Okay,
Yeah,
I can find that.
really. And it's evolved past that, certainly. I have a lot of other passions. Most of them seem to have wheels. I've been an avid bicyclist. Rode BMX a lot when I was a kid. A lot of mountain biking. We're into the outdoors and camping. We have a camper van that's set up to kind of go off road and go out. And yeah, it's awesome. So
Okay, so I heard that the term creative instigator can be associated with you, but I have no idea what that means. And I feel like I may also be a creative instigator, but I want to confirm. So tell me what that is.
You seem like it. You do. And I guess and I'm not going to lay claim to that as like a sole title for myself among people I work with, but that's kind of a large aspect of what you have to be if you're tasked with creating future products and ideas. And it can go anywhere from TV and movies, etc. But we always need to be pushing the boundaries of what people are comfortable with to a certain extent, and sprinkling in inspiration sources that people hadn't thought of. Like, have you ever thought about bringing in this totally sideways way of looking at things? And you have to, the minute that people get comfortable with a design aesthetic or a direction, that's when I get most worried. Like, everybody likes this, everybody's comfortable with this. Maybe it's time to really take a second look and are we really pushing enough? Is this going to be something that when it comes out, a few people will be uncomfortable? And that's what I think where the instigator comes from. Like, you want to kind of like be a little bit provocative with new designs. And
I feel like that's such a great term for so many people in our community. So many people are like 5 steps ahead, and you'll be on Pinterest, it'll be the same thing over and over again. And then you go to this person's blog and you're like, whoa, it's not mason jars anymore. Now macrame or whatever, like so many of us are thinking ahead. But I think that takes a special kind of headspace. Like, you design cars or designs that are not going to even hit the general public for like 3 to 5 years. Tell me about the bravery that takes to take that leap, because that's a huge commitment.
It's interesting you put that question out there, and I think it's probably a question, when you ask about bravery, that's probably a question more for the finance guys that have to bankroll.
Yeah, you're right.
Because I am part of, very fortunately, a community of people that we're just, all of us have a strong intuitive sense of what's next, and that's why we've been hired, people with stories very similar to myself that have just been following the progression of design, not just in automobiles, but in fashion and product design and culture and entertainment, political, and just thinking about what people are drawn to and seeing what people respond to, the abstract sense of all that. So from our perspective, for most of us, it's not an act of bravery, it's an act of just this is what has to happen. It's almost like an obvious, this is the next step. You can see where it's going, and I guess you have to be.
So I'm saying, like, you are just very intuition based. A lot of this is just your creativity. Everything is just coming from your intuition. And I think that's such an important point for us creators listening to this now, is the world is changing. Like, what we thought was going to be in December, back last December, is like completely different. And so I guess, so much of that is like just reminding us to just listen to our intuition now and let that spark our creativity.
Sure.
But I'm sure not everything has been super easy for you to get from point A to Z. Is there a project that maybe, or a creation that didn't come as easily to you? And what did you have to do creatively in your mind to kind of work through it and get there?
If there's anything that comes to mind immediately when you mention that, it's going to be the Kia Soul of all vehicles, which um, I was in the right place at the right time. I hired into Kia just as they were kicking off a program to try and invent this next really kind of iconic youth vehicle for the brand, almost like a halo type vehicle that would really kind of lead a charge for bringing the brand to the global stage. And I was sent to Korea for about 2 months to work on this. It was shortly after I'd hired in, and among the cultural difficulties to begin with, just not being able to speak the language with most people, and I guess just extreme culture shock, which itself proved to be ultimately the strongest source of inspiration that I could have imagined in that space. And I was given very precious little time to come up with a design. I think I had 4 days to come up with a sketch from
Oh,
scratch for this vehicle. And there was luckily a weekend in between.
oh, good.
And I think it was one day on that weekend I was home, and I was just desperate, searching for some sort of inspiration to come up with something. There was other individuals who had proposals in this same project that had been working for probably 2 weeks already on this same project. And as I collapsed after the end of like a good 12 or 14-hour day, I think it was a Friday night, a bizarre Korean TV program came on that was highlighting a lot of interesting and iconic wildlife of Korea. And they spent quite a lot of time looking at the wild boar of all things. And I guess the wild boar is the most untamed and largest, still again, untamed creature that roams the Korean wilderness and comes quite a bit of times into small towns and villages, and it's very mischievous. It's kind of like right away I'm already like, I like this guy, like he doesn't follow rules. Like they can't pin him down. They've tried to kind of pen him in. He can't be boxed in, and he just keeps evolving, and he's just very nimble, but he's scrappy, and he's not the most like classically beautiful animal by any means, but he's a badass. So, and there's like just this real compelling, squat, tough, unapologetic persona to the thing. They're just like, this is what you're getting. And I was like, man, I needed to use that as inspiration for this car. And
you're saying the Kia Soul, which is like this massively popular young generation car,
sure,
totally inspired by a wild boar.
Absolutely.
This is how creative people brains work. Like, what?
He's got all these characteristics that on paper don't sound so good, and we quite often do these. I guess you might call them like dream boards. We do these image boards where we bring together all these elements that we think are compelling parts of what could be a total design idea. And there's pictures of the wild boar on there, and I started putting outdoor gear like little backpacks and camping equipment, and before you knew it, the wild boar had a little backpack like he's going on camping trips, or he's like a hip kid with his electronics in the back or something. But I started putting keywords all over this board, including words like rude and just bold, and the Koreans had
rude car. Yes.
Pardon?
Yeah, like I guess that's your key demographic.
Yeah, and it just worked somehow. Before you knew it, you had this scrappy little clay model started taking form very quickly, and it just had this aura and this presence about it. Like when you work on certain projects, it's almost like you're liberating. This sounds a little bit over the top, but it sounds like you're liberating and I hate to use the word, it's like you're liberating a soul of some sort from these materials. And just
I think a lot of creators can relate to that in some way, or something will just be nagging at you. I know when I've had things that have gone really viral or really hit with people, it's always started with like kernel of like, oh, I should do something about this idea, and you just feel like it's like it just needs to get out.
Right.
And I think sometimes it's easier to let that out in the others, but I also know that like many of us, thrust into this new situation. You are probably dealing with maybe having to think through things a little bit differently than you did before. Tell me a little bit about your work situation now versus January 1 of this year. Like, how is it for you?
And this is shared by millions right now, right? So I don't want to sound like anything that I've got is too unique here, and if anything, it's just let's treat this as a shared experience. But wow, as a creative designer, we still go to work, most of us, in a space where we're all under one roof, and most of us put our headphones on and get into our little zone and create quite a bit. And I think we've been led to romanticize this notion of working from home as being like, wow, how different would that be? Like, I sit here by myself anyway most of the day, even though I'm surrounded by others. Like, wouldn't it be great to be home? Like, create your own hours, just do this thing. And then when it's hit all of us so fast, the reality of it, that you do need people more than you think you do. And I think that's been the biggest challenge. And I'm sure your community, same thing. People are reaching out to each other in ways they never realized they would do quite so often. More video chats, more phone calls, more texts, just long calls with family that you never really thought you had the time to talk to as much. So that was the biggest challenge, getting over that hurdle of just not having the contact that you thought.
So do you find that you guys will just like open up Zoom and just work silently together, or like,
we haven't done that.
how are you like feeding off of each other's energy in a way that you used to do in the office, or is that just something you're having to adapt to?
I think we're adapting, and and the company, I think a lot of companies have these proprietary chat softwares that are installed, so you can send messages, you can kind of link up cameras if you need to, you can share projects back and forth with each other, you can share your screen with each other to kind of show each other what you're working on. So we're using the heck out of that. But I think we're all really evolving in terms of a new type of just kind of creative flow. Like, we're finding creativity in ways that we never had to before. There's quite a few things that I've noted about this new scenario, that there's a lot of awesome in this too.
Talk about that a little bit before the call, so let's get into that, because you had made some notes that I thought were really insightful and important and shared amongst our community for sure.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess right off the bat, and I've chatted this up with you beforehand, and this, I think, has struck a lot of people that aren't kids anymore, certainly this way, but time behaves very differently right now for most people. I don't know how everybody's seeing this, but it's like time feels more like, I haven't felt time behave like this since I was 12. Like, when we had those summers that seemed like they'd stretch forever before you'd ever have to go back to school. And it's this long permanent now, and for better or for worse, it's amazing. Like, we've kind of stepped out of this crazy stream of time that, for artists and creatives in particular, I think a lot of people kind of reject the notion of like starting work at exactly the same time every day, having a deadline that's incredibly rigid. We work with those, but I think where inspiration comes from is from a place when you're daydreaming, you're outside of time, and it's like the whole world is behaving this way, and it's just this rich landscape of just now. You're not thinking so far ahead. It's just what can I observe, and you can kind of get lost in the moment a bit more now.
Definitely. I let myself take a very long coffee break in the morning while my children crawl on me, but I just like, just think about my day. And it is nice to not have the hustle and bustle of the morning, get the kids to school, get to work, whatever it is that we are typically doing at that time of day.
Cool. Yeah, geez, that's, hopefully you retain some of this when things go back to a little bit more normal.
And also get childcare back. Everything will be so much better then. Yes. What was the point on your list?
I've got some other things here. I guess just that, again, kind of in keeping with what's going on with the time behaving differently. Like, everything right now is kind of about potential. Like, and for what I do, and people that are designers and creatives in general, like, the whole idea of dreaming forward has never been stronger than right now, I think, in a lot of our lives, which it can be like an incredible wellspring just for optimism, You know, like things can only get better. I mean, there's individuals who will disagree, but I prefer to stay in the camp, and I think this is where most of us we got to steer the ship where we want it to go, and I think this is a real opportunity to just really focus more. You know, the whole it sounds cheesy, but the idea of dreaming forward just always keeps striking me right now. It's like everything's possible at any, and this is the case at any point in time. Like everything is potential. So
what other choice do we have? You know, stuck here in this moment, we just got to keep moving forward and thinking ahead.
sure, yeah, geez. Okay, number 3, Zen Acceptance, which is kind of cool. Like a lot of people, everybody's having to kind of cope with things and come to a certain place of acceptance, which is very Zen. And that is another kind of I guess item that you really kind of needs to be in place for people to be at their most creative often anyway. So I think the sooner that people kind of, like, everyone can kind of grow and learn through what we're going through as a collective species right now. So I just find that awesome. Like everything. Pardon?
It's a good lesson, I think, for all of us to practice. I know a lot of us are really trying to hone in on mindfulness and
sure, absolutely,
being one with whatever we can right now.
Absolutely. And like the minute you kind of go through that wall and accept things, like everything opens up again. You know, it's like they talk about how cats, I don't have any cats, but they, especially indoor cats, will, like, if they're an indoor cat, like their house is their universe, right? And they're totally okay with that. And our universes have all kind of gotten a little bit smaller. And once we accept that, you know, and our know that our minds can still roam free, it's still pretty cool. So I don't know if this sounds a little crazy.
Hey, we love crazy. We embrace it.
Let's see. Yeah, briefly, just the whole idea of boredom right now. A lot of people are having to cope with boredom, and boredom, like, I think there's nothing better for becoming creative than being forced at some point to confront boredom. It's in those moments when you don't pick up the phone, you don't check what's next on the social media. I love social media, don't get me wrong, but like those moments where things kind of wind down a little bit, that is truly when your brain wakes up. And like the brain doesn't want a void, really. So it's either you're consuming some media, or you're consuming nature, you know, which is great, or you're creating, you know. When I think getting bored is actually an awesome opportunity to become creative, truly. You know,
there's a lot of parents right now who are really trying to embrace that point. A lot of us are like, you know, just, you cannot be on screens 12 hours a day. Like, we'll give you 8 hours a day. And then you do 4 hours a day. I don't know. We're really trying to find that balance. But I know a lot of us grew up with these extremely boring summers, and we have such fantastic memories of the things we did.
You invent, you create your own reality. It's amazing, you know. And that's awesome. Let's see. I guess the last thing that I'll bring up really is just, for better or for worse, like all of us, and this can be awesome. You're holed up with all the cool stuff and cool environment that you've accumulated your whole life. You've accumulated all this, so it should be one of the most inspiring environments that you can possibly have, because you created it. You know, you're not forced to sit in a workspace or cubicle that someone else deemed as the ideal creative environment. It's your space. So if it isn't there yet, then, you know, you can do what you need to. And geez, if you're like myself, I don't have a basement here. I wish I did. I've got a spare room that's full of boxes of things that I'm sure everybody has lots of boxes of things that they just haven't gone through, but like, you are sitting on top of a treasure trove of stuff that you can strip mine if you really choose to. You just like look inward. You've got this place that you created. So if you can't be creative there, it's like,
so tell me about when you had to force everything home and create your own workspace. Tell us, like, how did you set up your workspace to inspire creativity? Do you work in one spot? Do you move around the house? Did you redecorate?
Didn't redecorate. I guess I was lucky in that I had always kind of dreamed about the idea of working from home. So I had kind of set up a space to begin with. I think a lot of us have done something where we have a spot where we can sketch, and I'd given it a lot of thought. And luckily, the home we're in right now, the room I'm in, has a door right to the side of the desk that I work at that opens up, and it's a full length screen door that looks out into a backyard of avocado trees. And I just I'm very happy to sit here all day long listening to the wind in the trees, and I feel very fortunate to be in this house. But
That's fantastic.
but
I want to circle back to your childhood where we first started talking about,
Sure.
because I want to know if you remember like what the first thing that inspired you was, and if you remember like the first time really like getting into drawing cars, or has it just been something you've done as long as you can remember?
It's the latter. It really is. I've got, my mom still has sketches that I drew when I was like 3.
Oh my gosh.
You know, they're not quite as awesome as what I sketch now. They're close. You have to be told it's a car, but
it's just
yeah,
always in your passion. I think that's such a great lesson, I think, for parents to really say, I feel like kids tell you who they are from the womb.
right.
I feel like you just have to listen. So I think we are all spending a lot of time with our children right now, and it's a great time for us to really get to know kind of what are these passions that we can fuel. Okay, we're going to take some audience questions real quick.
Great.
Cheryl says, I'm watching with my 2 sons, and my 10-year-old wants to know, besides a Kia, what is your favorite car and how a designer?
Wow. You know, ask any designer what their favorite car is, and you better have an hour to listen to all the different variations. But I grew up, I think the first car that gave me goosebumps when I was a little kid, and I use this word in all seriousness, the car that I looked at, and even as a little kid, I knew was something special. There was 2 of them, you know, at the time there was, wow, it's funny. The first time I saw, I think one of those 1970s Corvettes, and it was in like a sparkly paint finish. You know, it was just, there was just something surreal about the car. It was the first car I'd seen that looked like a Hot Wheels car that was real. And it still burned into my brain. But I think there was a Plymouth Barracuda that I saw not long after that. It was a 1971 Plymouth Barracuda, and the grill of that car still makes the hair on my arm stand up. I just find it so awesome, that car. And briefly, I eventually ended up meeting the gentleman who designed that car. I met him in Detroit. I ended up working with him briefly for a summer. He was,
oh wow.
Yeah, I make no bones about it. Half the reason I went to the school I went to in Detroit was because I hoped, being in Detroit, I would meet some of the people that had designed these cars that had inspired me so much, just so that I could thank them for what they'd done. And I actually found this guy, older gentleman named Milt, who had been with Chrysler in the 60s, in the 70s, and he was responsible for so many of the cars that I still find just timeless and absolutely perfect. And you know, to get the chance to kind of meet these people and let them know how powerful what they, because they, you know, to them, you know, it's a passion, but they're also like, well, it's a product, you know, it's a job. You know, they're a little bit tactical about it, but you never know what you create that might inspire someone.
Literally change your life.
Absolutely. So
great. I think I want to, Keisha wants to say we just have to get out of our own way. I think I want to touch on that as we exit. And our last talking point is kind of how are you getting out of your own way right now? Can you give us like maybe 1 or 2 actionable tips for like sparking creativity when we just feel like we're in a rut?
Yes.
What do you do?
Stop overthinking, you know, more than anything. And there's something, right? Yeah, I think way too much about everything. I analyze. That's the engineer in me from my dad. But in the industry, we talk quite often about doing telephone sketches, which when you're on the phone and you're talking to somebody, and then you just let your creative mind kind of go free. When we start sketching, when we're talking on the phone with somebody, we often come up with our very, very best ideas because we're not thinking about it so hard. You got to just, and you can carry that over into when you're sitting down to create too. Like don't put rules on what you're doing. Like just let ideas flow, and judge them later. Judge them tomorrow. Like, or just don't. Just like run them past a friend. What do you think? Just don't edit yourself. Because that's we've got way too many rules already burned into our brains that your creative brain's going to find a way to get past them if you just let it every once in a while.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I feel inspired, and
me too.
It feels good to know that we are all literally living the same reality, including the guy who came up with one of the most iconic cars of our generation. So thank you for coming here to make us feel better and inspire us, Mike.
Thank you.
And you guys, we will be back with some more great guest interviews, I'm sure. So be sure to stay tuned. Thanks, guys. Bye.